Hey folks, welcome to round 4 of the Valkyrie Trials event at HalCon 2025. Of the 3 games I had played so far, I won 2 of them and lost 1 of them, so this next game was going to determine whether or not I made it into the top cut. In round 4, I was up against Malcolm, who brought a combination of Maledrix and Festering Honor Guard with the Gallery Vanguard and a Krakenling. I think this was an interesting read on Malcolm's part of the other armies that were likely to show up at the event, as well as the existence of the Gullixwing treasure glyph in the format. As I talked about in my preparation video for HalCon 2025, there just wasn't really a Gallery-focused army that I felt satisfied the requirements of this format, where you could get the Gullixwing treasure glyph, put it on a unique hero somewhere in your army, and actually make use of it. So what Malcolm decided to do was to take the first half of the army and make it Maledrix focused, because Maledrix was the obvious recipient of the treasure glyph, and then use the second half of the points remaining to just build up as much Gallery force as possible. The idea here is that you could lead Maledrix and do as much damage as possible with that half, and then hopefully have enough numbers left over to overwhelm whatever reserves your opponent has. Now, through my own solo playtesting, I knew my army could deal with Gallery, at least that was my experience. However, Maledrix plus Gallery might put my army to the test. Let's see how the game went. So here we are on the map Iced Cider by Caps, and I'm starting on the left, my opponent's on the right, obviously. This isn't one of my favorite maps in the map pool. I did play on this one quite a bit in preparation for this event. I have a hard time with the amount of lava terrain on the map. The whole center is all basically unviable height that you can't be on at the end of a round. So it makes these 2-3 hexes very powerful in the placement of your army. So those are hotly contested zones. I would have liked to have seen like just a little bit more safe terrain somewhere in the center of the map, but oh well. Anyways, the placement of my army is actually something pretty well rehearsed at this point. On this map, I choose to set up like this. I split my Frost Claws, north and south. I put Adalburn in the center here, where he can gain as much ground as possible on his activation. I keep the 4 exiles in the back, still on the grass terrain, so that they don't have to climb up out of the start zone. And then I put the Crimson Widow on the single Wellspring Water tile in the back there that isn't adjacent to any height. And the reason why I place her there is because if Wanok should appear on the map, I can put Wanok wounds on Crimson Widow, and then I can roll to heal those wounds because she's standing on Wellspring Water. So that's a pretty convenient placement there. Remember, I'm not trying to take any turns with Crimson Widow. If I have to put a real order marker on her, things are dire. As luck would have it, in the north we have the glyph of Wanok, and in the south we have the glyph of Quillian, I think is the name of it. It's the sudden movement glyph. This is a temporary glyph. The way this one works is a figure moves onto the glyph, and then you can move any 3 of your other figures up to 5 spaces. Once activated, the glyph is burned and lost for the rest of the game, so whoever gets there first gets that movement bonus. Though it's only a temporary effect, it's a very powerful glyph, and I want to get there if I can, because that gives me an opportunity to rush bears in without having to use run. Before I get into the game, I just want to talk about the psychological aspect a little bit. Malcolm was a seasoned player, and I could tell because he rolled up to the game here with all our Valkyrie dice and Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalker wound markers, which was the game that was kind of made out of the corpse of HeroScape after the game was retired. So so if my intimidation tactic of using the first edition Rise of the Valkyrie dice wasn't working, I think his intimidation tactic of using the Aller Valkyrie dice was. The mental game of HeroScape is also, a valid component to be worth discussing. And in fact, it's actually one of the reasons why I decided to bring this custom painted Adalburn figure. This was painted by Brett, who does all of the artwork for the Slugger channel and everything like that. He's a really talented miniatures painter, and I want to feature more of his work on my channel in the future. So this Adelburn is dark and scary and threatening looking, right? And so I wanted my opponent to treat Adelburn as a bigger threat than the Frost Claws. So yeah, I don't know, I was trying to play the mind game there a little bit. Remember, I need to keep the Frost Claws alive to continue to get that +1 attack bonus from the Crimson Widow, to get value out of that. So I want my opponent to attack Adelburn. Put wounds on Adelburn, don't take out the Frost Claws. Anyways, my order markers here are the same as always, 3 on the Frost Claws and the X on Crimson Widow. My opponent has 3 order markers on Maledrix and 1 order marker on the Gallery. Now, my army suffers because my opponent can always tell where the X is, but in this case, I know exactly where the X is on my opponent's card. It has to be on the Gallery, because if my opponent was actually going to activate the Gallery and that was a real order marker, they should also put the X on too, because then you get an extra +1 movement from Tidal Advance. So there's just no reality in which my opponent should be putting only 1 numbered order marker on the Gallery and not using the X on them as well, especially round 1, right out of the gate. You want to gain as much ground as possible. So I know there's 3 activations of Maledrix coming my way. So first thing before initiative is rolled, my opponent uses Tidal Advance to move all Gallery and the Krakenling 1 space each. I win initiative, and I use my first order marker to move the bears and Adelburn up into the center of the map. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd practiced on this map quite a bit in my preparation for HalCon, so the placement of my bears here, both in the start zone and where they've ended up here after the first order marker, is something that's actually rehearsed. I have them in specific places for a reason. It's almost like a chess opening in that respect. So Adelburn's here in the center because he can specifically threaten this space on my opponent's 3 hex height. It's a very important space to control, and so I try to get Adelburn into a spot where he can do that on my order marker 2. For the Frost Claws, I try to move them up and gain as much ground as I can, but additionally, I have them in places where any one of them can jump on the glyph on either the north or the south side of the map, depending on what appears. I think it's a pretty solid opening, and it keeps a lot of my options open depending on what my opponent chooses to do. My opponent reveals order marker 1 on Queen Maledrix and moves to a pretty savvy defensive position, I must say. Maledrix jumps up here, right in between the Gallery and the high ground snow, but the Festering Honor Guard create a screen where I can't actually exploit that high ground against Maledrix. Moreover, none of the Festering Honor Guard are within range of Adelburn at the moment, and obviously that was done intentionally to limit the potential of crushing blow. So that was my opponent's turn, and it was coming up on my order marker 2, and a major decision point for me. What do I do next? The reason why this decision point was so pivotal is that I have access to the sudden movement glyph. Either one of these Frost Claws can jump down there, grab the glyph, and I can move 3 of my figures 5 spaces forward before taking a turn with them. This gives me a lot of offensive potential in this turn, although the question is, how do I make use of it? So first off, Adelburn can't be a part of it because he activates first before the Frost Claws do. So I have to just move Adelburn separately from this whole operation, which also means that if I do this, the Frost Claws are going to be in front of Adelburn and are going to be bigger targets than Adelburn, which is not what I want. However, can I really pass up this opportunity? So here were some of the permutations I was going through in my head. My first thought was then to move Adelburn here onto the 3 hex, because I can't do anything offensively within this turn, might as well try to threaten that range. I would then use one of these Frost Claws to jump on the movement glyph, to then send the remaining 3 Frost Claws forward. So the 2 in the middle would end up on these 2 spaces after using the glyph, and then 3 spaces of their own movement to get there. They could then make fully charged up attacks against the Festering Honor Guard next to them, whereas the one in the north here I would send into the middle region of the north here and attack another Festering Honor Guard. So hopefully that would be 3 Festering Honor Guards killed. The problem I had with this is that if my attacks were successful, it opened up an opportunity for Maledrix to come in and get 2 attacks on 2 different Frostclaw Paladins, potentially killing both of them. That would really be bad news bears, as we say in the business. Ultimately, trading 2 Frostclaw Paladins for 3 Festering Honor Guard, it didn't seem like a worthy trade to me, so I didn't pursue this option. Another avenue of strategy that I wish I would have seen in the moment would be to just abandon the northern fight and go kill a bunch of Gallery. I could have sent Adalburn southward to tangle with the Gallery down here, especially because I know they're sleeping. There's no way there's a real order marker on them. I could have then grabbed the sudden movement glyph and moved my other Frostclaws into combat, probably sacrificing the one in the north to tie up Maledrix. The idea here then would be to fight my opponent where they're weak, rather than fight them where they're strong. If I can go kill a bunch of Gallery that can't fight back, that seems like a good deal to me, especially if the Gallery themselves are kind of blocking Maledrix from coming in and dealing with the problem. She would be very far out of position at that point. The risk that this scenario runs then, however, is triggering a base trade like you'd see in professional StarCraft games. Sometimes when 2 opponents' armies are out of position, the easiest option is just go try to kill your opponent's base while it's defenseless. I could definitely see my opponent just abandoning ship in that instance, trying to go kill off all my Exiles and Crimson Widow, while I focus on cleaning up the Gallery. And all that would do in the end is just prolong the fight between the bears and the bugs, which is going to determine the whole game. The third thought I had was just simply retreat off of the lava height and try to fall back a bit. There are some problems inherent in this, however, though. Because my opponent lost initiative, that means that they have the potential of the initiative flip going into round 2, which could be devastating for me if they set that up properly. Additionally, it then basically concedes access to both glyphs, and both of them are bad for my opponent to have access to. So I kind of need to be a little bit more forward and threatening. I'd be really curious to hear from folks, especially those who are more experienced in tournament play than I am, what you would do in this situation. What do you do with your Order Marker 2 here? Like I said, I agonized over this decision because I knew the significance of it. Here's what I came up with, though, and I'll explain why I don't think this option was the right one. Because I was unable to find a suitable way to use the sudden movement glyph, I opt not to trigger it and decide to stock up and make a defensive posture. I think on nearly any other map, this defensive posture makes sense. I'm moving forward slightly, taking all the high ground, and really trying to threaten my opponent. However, this is iced cider we're talking about here, and the entire center of the map is lava, which means at the end of the round, any of my figures left standing on it are at risk of taking wounds. My opponent knows this, and quite adeptly moves in and tethers me down onto those hexes by sending in the Festering Honor Guard. Additionally, they take that very coveted 3-hex height with Maledrix and a Festering Honor Guard as well. To add insult to injury, one of my Frostclaw Paladins, despite being on height, is still wounded by the Festering Honor Guard nipping at its heels. This is all just really bad for me. I'm in a horrible spot now, because I only have one more order marker to get all my bears off of lava. Just one turn ago, I had all the power in the world to determine where the fight was going to happen, and I chose the worst possible place to have the fight. This wasn't a case of my opponent rolling really well, or Maledrix being overpowered, or any of that. It was just a misplay on my part. I made a mistake, and it's going to be tough for me to weasel my way out of this one. Even though the outlook is bleak here, I think there are some ways where I could have maybe just tried to go for broke, trying to take down Maledrix here. I think swinging Adalburn around, using Crushing Blow on the Festering Honor Guard, and then just going for a big swing up on Maledrix could be a play, and then moving in with the other Frostclaws that were nearby to try to just take out Maledrix. I mean, obviously there's huge risk in attempting to do that, because if you fail, Maledrix at 1 life remaining hits just as hard as Maledrix at full health, so, you know, you could be in for a lot of trouble. Additionally, as I talked about in my HalCon preparation video, killing Maledrix doesn't actually solve the problem, because then the Festering Honor Guard all get +1 attack, and they get all the order markers off of Maledrix's cards. So I don't know. It would save Adelburn from being infested, though, which was top of my mind, that's for sure. I should have, at the very least, noticed that moving this wounded Frostclaw off of height and circling around onto Wannock to deny it from my opponent was the right call. That's definitely the right move here. However, that's not what I did. Here's what I did on my order marker 3. For some reason, I decide to stand my ground with Adelburn and use Crushing Blow on the Festering Honor Guard next to him. And I think this really minimizes his attack potential, not to mention leaves him on lava so he can get wounded by lava damage. I think this is just a straight up misuse of the most valuable piece in my army. Speaking of misplays, let's talk about what I do with the Frostclaws here, because it's not that much better. For some reason, I decide to leave the wounded Frostclaw on height on lava, meaning that he'll probably die at the end of the round. It's a 50-50 chance. And I decide to run the other 2 Frostclaws that were behind Adelburn. I run one onto Wannock for some reason, and I decide to run the other out into the middle here to attack this Festering Honor Guard, and I don't get the kill, so that's a turn wasted there. I leave a beautiful path open for Maledrix to come and get an attack down on the full life Frostclaw Paladin that I decided to put on Wannock for some reason. Rather than use them to attack, I threw them away uselessly here. About the only Frostclaw that I used effectively in this turn was the one in the south. I just moved it 3 spaces onto a good spot to kill a Festering Honor Guard, and now it can threaten the Gallery in the start zone next round. 2 turns just littered with misplays is pretty tough to come back from if your opponent is as skilled as Malcolm was from across the table. He saw these misplays and he absolutely exploited them. So like I mentioned earlier, on his order marker, he swings in and attacks down on the Frostclaw that was standing on the Wannock glyph, killing him, and does another wound to the Frostclaw behind him. He then moves his Festering Honor Guard out here into the middle, and this is a really, really savvy play. This is a strong play, because now he threatens both the sudden movement glyph, but also, and I didn't realize this in the moment, he also threatens the exiles in my start zone with that one little Festering Honor Guard. I'm gonna have to go back and deal with that Festering Honor Guard at some point, but I don't want to do it with Adelburn, and he's kind of my only option to go and do that. Otherwise, I gotta send this Frostclaw back and retreat. I don't want to do that either. So yeah, anyways, I lose a Frostclaw in the north, but I also lose one to lava damage, and Adelburn also takes a wound from lava at the end of the round. Frankly, I don't know what I was thinking that round. My first order marker was great, and then order marker 2 and 3 were just abysmal choices on my part. So horrible misplays, and my opponent was definitely skilled enough to take advantage of my blunders. Going into round 2, I still put my order markers on the Frostclaws and one on Crimson Widow. My opponent has now split 2 and 2 between Maledrix and the Gallery, so the fish movement phase, the tidal advance happens, and all of the Gallery and the Krakenling get to move 2 spaces this time. Again, I win initiative, and you can see here the fish have moved up and my bears have moved in on Maledrix, so I'm attempting to do some damage here. At this point in time, I have taken out 4 of the 5 Festering Honor Guard, only leaving that one annoying one in the middle there. I can't see Maledrix's card from this angle here, so I don't know how many wounds she has on her, but a heighted attack from Adelburn going down into Maledrix, that has to have done something there, so we'll just leave it as a big question mark for now. My Frostclaw in the south engages the Gallery and manages to kill one of them. It looks like I'm missing a photo of my opponent's turn here, but they decide to take a leave an engagement attack with Maledrix, move her up adjacent to Adelburn here, and attack him. And they send this Festering Honor Guard into my start zone to attack my exiles, which is super annoying. So annoying to deal with. So here's the aftermath of that turn you can see from my perspective here. On my order marker 2, I then move my Adelburn up onto the max height on lava, and I move my Frostclaw Paladin up to join him to fight Maledrix. You can see at this point in time, Adelburn has taken 7 wounds and has been infested. It's not looking good for Adelburn. My Frostclaw in the south is just hunky-dory, punching away at Gallery, takes another one out, and still remains the most effective tool in my army at this point in time. My opponent reveals Order Marker 2 on Maladrix, and through 2 different attacks up on height, she's able to kill Adelburn, which then spawns the Festering Honor Guard that was infested inside of him. My opponent also manages to kill one of my exiles with the Festering Honor Guard in my start zone. Super annoying, and there's nothing I can do at this point in time to deal with it. My order markers are elsewhere, so these are just free kills, and those are really, really costly kills. I reveal Order Marker 3 on the last 2 remaining Frostclaw Paladins, and I do what I can here. The one that's engaged to Maladrix attacks Maladrix, and I know I get her down to 1 life remaining, so I don't know what she was at before, but now she's at 1 life remaining, and that'll be significant because she's trapped on the lava space. My Frostclaw in the south has now created an opening and actually steps forward to attack the Kraken. And in this attack, I'm able to do 2 wounds to the Kraken, and this severely limits its offensive potential in the end game. Normally, the Kraken can make 3 attacks on its turn, but it reduces the number of attacks it can make by 1 for every wound on the card. So by having 2 wounds on the card, that means it can only attack once now, which is far less threatening. My opponent reveals Order Marker number 3 on the Gallery, and they move in to attack my 2 different Frostclaw Paladins. They kill the one on the lava in the north there, and they are able to wound the one in the south, but not kill it. It also looks like I took this photo after we resolved lava damage, as Maladrix and the Festering Honor Guard next to her are both killed by the lava. We're going into round 3 now, and I basically have to put all my order markers on the exiles and just hope that I can do something here. I keep the X on Crimson Widow, of course, but we really see the power of my opponent's army composition here, because having the sheer number, the sheer volume of Gallery left over after taking out my main attack force, it leaves me in a really rough spot. With only 3 exiles left, I could literally attack Gallery every single turn this round and still not kill all of them with successful attack rolls each time. It's insurmountable odds here. And the Gallery are pretty much assured to kill an exile anytime they attack it, with 3 attack on 2 defense. It's not looking very likely for me here. I'm really glad my opponent didn't just insult me by putting an order marker on the last remaining Festering Honor Guard to kill another exile. I think I would probably just cry in that moment. No, they put all 4 of their order markers on the Gallery, and so here comes the flood. It's coming my way. With Tidal Advance, we can now see the Gallery moving in full force, just inching their way across the map. My Frostclaw in the back is really annoying for my opponent to deal with because it's successfully tethered 4 Gallery and the Krakenling. They're just stuck to it. So at least I don't have to deal with all the Gallery all at once. That improves my chances somewhat, but it's still a Hail Mary. My opponent wins initiative, but I seemingly took this photo at the start of their turn rather than at the end of their turn, so it doesn't actually show the resolution of what they did. In essence, they took several attacks into my Frostclaw Paladin to kill it off, finally ending the bear threat, and they moved a couple of Gallery forward, trying to threaten the exiles in the start zone. So with my first order marker, I moved my exiles forward, opting not to use Black Powder Shot, instead just going in for the melee attacks. I did this because my opponent had height and the tree cover bonus, so it just seemed unlikely that I would actually get any kills if I used Black Powder, and my opponent can just reach me and kill my figures if I don't get the kills there. So I just decided to go in for the melee attacks. It seemed like higher odds of success. I'm able to kill 1 Gallery and the last Festering Honor Guard. My opponent then moves forward with more Gallery and kills one of my exiles. At this point, I do decide to back up and try to make the Black Powder Shot work, but unfortunately I miss both my attacks. And so on my opponent's order marker, they trigger the sudden movement glyph and rush in with a bunch of Gallery, killing all of the exiles. Because of this, my order marker 3 is also dead. Notably, towards the end of this round, my opponent also moved on to Wannock, which is totally the right call in the endgame state like this, and they successfully apply 1 wound to Crimson Widow. However, now we're going into round 4, I get to roll to heal that wound because I placed Crimson Widow on Wellspring Water. I am unsuccessful in my attempt, however. So the final round is basically a formality at this point. I put all my order markers on Crimson Widow, my opponent puts all their order markers on the Gallery, and she just goes to town trying to chop up any fish that come her way. I don't have a photo of it, but I win initiative and I move Crimson Widow forward, killing 1 Gallery. On my opponent's order marker, they get a full surround on Crimson Widow, but are only able to deal 1 more wound to her. On my order marker, I attack with Crimson Widow and kill 1 more Gallery. My opponent then moves in more Gallery and finishes off Crimson Widow, and I end the game in defeat. In reviewing my footage from this event, this was definitely the match where I just made the most number of mistakes. I just had a lot of errors in my gameplay, and my opponent sitting across from me was too skilled for me to make those kind of blunders and still have a chance at winning. They were able to exploit every mistake I made, so kudos to Malcolm. They definitely deserve the win here. I think this kind of speaks to some of the stresses of playing in a tournament setting. This was actually only my 3rd ever HeroScape tournament, and it totally tests a different skill that you need to have as a player. This idea of being able to reset between games and treat each one as if it's the first one of the day, and go in with your full attention and focus. I think I was a little maybe flustered from my loss to Adam earlier in the day, and I didn't lock in here, right? So yeah, I definitely fumbled the ball in this one here, which put my tournament standings at 2-2. I guess I'm always open to losing a game of HeroScape. I have fun if I win or lose, but I wish I would have played better at the very least. This loss meant that I wouldn't make the top cut, and I couldn't participate in the semifinals or finals at HalCon 2025. So this game marks the end of my tournament career out in Halifax this year. However, we're not totally done. I actually did play 1 more game, and I will talk about that one in the next video.